She then gets a tattoo on the 2nd, which that's going to be another $150 right there. Gets a tattoo saying Bella Vita, which interestingly she's covered over now with a bigger tattoo. And then on the 3rd, so Cindy Anthony, who has a MySpace page, remember MySpace, writes, she came into my life unexpectedly, and the title is Mike Haley is Missing, Current Mood Distraught.
Yeah, I got to say something about the mom when you're done reading this, but
yeah,
go
please.
on.
She came into my life unexpectedly just as she left me. So I hadn't read this. The precious little angel from above gave me strength and unconditional love. Now she is gone, and I don't know why. All I am guilty of is loving her and providing her a safe home. Jealousy has taken her away. Jealousy from the one person that should be thankful for all the love and support I've given her. A mother's love is deep. However, there are limits when one is betrayed, and the one she loved and trusted the most. The daughter comes to her mother for support when she is pregnant. The mother says without hesitation it will be okay, and it was. But then the lies and betrayal began. First it seemed harmless. Love is blind. A mother will look for the good in her child and give them a chance to change. This mother gave chance after chance for her daughter to change, but instead more lies and more betrayal. What does the mother get for giving her daughter all of these chances? A broken heart. The daughter who stole money, lots of money, leaves without warning and does not let her mother now speak to the baby that her mother raised, fed, clothed, sheltered, paid for her medical bills, etc. Instead, tells her friends that her mother is controlling her life and she needs her space. No money, no future.
Uh-oh. You cut out. We're still live. I mean, what I was going to say about this while we wait for Sean to return is that I see the Dateline interview or the Dateline show. One of the things I watched prepping for this was, and again, I think I mentioned this on the last time we recorded, I watched a show, and it was recorded sometime between when Casey was arrested and accused of the murder, but before the trial, which was a long period of time. I believe it was within that, I think it was probably around November of 2008, sometime shortly after the election that year. And one of the things that, I mean, they even used it in the highlights, you know, how they'll edit out some clips and show you at the front end of the show to kind of, you know, give, as a hook to get you to watch the whole thing, is Casey Anthony's mother saying, you know, that it wasn't just Casey's daughter, it was our daughter. I mean, it was this creepy level of incursion into the role of, you know, the relationship and the space between mother and daughter. I mean, she obviously wasn't respecting that boundary. That I'm grandmom, I'm not mom. And, you know, that Casey has an, at the end of the day, fundamental right. Now, having said that, I can understand why, because I gather, you know, that there was a failure on Casey's part to be the responsible mother figure all the time because she was young. I mean, like a lot of the dynamic is what you wouldn't surprise anybody. You know, a young girl becomes pregnant really before she's ready. The parents are, you know, maybe a little concerned about that, but want to welcome a grandchild, want their daughter to feel loved and supported, say, hey, you can stay home. We'll figure this out. They, you know, as people who are older and more responsible and obviously more settled in their life, have more of an ability to provide the kind of stable environment that you'd want a child to grow up in. But you know, what starts to be clear is that, I mean, I'm not even blaming Mrs. Anthony necessarily, because I can understand that it would be very difficult. And I certainly know some women who've had to raise children sort of in loco parentis for children, for their own children who are not yet responsible. But you start to get that level of identification of, well, this child, and the thing is that Casey wasn't irresponsible in the sense of, as far as we know, she wasn't a drug addict or an alcoholic or someone who was not responsible for herself in like a fundamental way. She was just a kid who wasn't really ready to deal with life. and wanted to be, you kind of had 1 foot in and 1 foot out of adulthood, you might say. Kaylee being the foot in and the rest of her life being the foot out. And that can be a really difficult situation to navigate. But nevertheless, there is a sense that I do feel like you can kind of sense that there was a little bit of a boundary crossing, that her mom probably went too far. And this post, I think, speaks to that.
I think I somewhat agree. I think Cindy Anthony felt a bit of entitlement because of the amount of flexibility she had given to Casey over the years.
Yes.
How understanding and accepting she had been, because we had reports that she had lied, that she was not going to class, and they had a high school graduation party for her, even though she never graduated high school.
Yes.
So I think there's an element where she protected her maybe a bit too much. There's probably a sense of entitlement from her. But also, I get the impression, given Casey's reaction to her daughter being whatever, shows that Cindy Anthony was probably raising this child fully with very little support from Casey, and she probably didn't judge her much, didn't force her to do much, and now she feels a bit betrayed because she has dedicated so much of her time without expectation to taking care of Kaylee, and now Casey's made the decision that that's too much. And I think she's a bit brokenhearted, but she's also worried because she's watched her daughter probably showing some level of incapability of taking care of her daughter from day to day. So I think there's a bit of entitlement there, which you could almost argue maybe, if that is the case, was justifiable by Cindy Anthony.
No, I'm throwing stones, and I've never been in that situation, and it is almost unfathomable, unimaginable to me how difficult it would be to maintain, like, to basically, as an adult human being, to, on the one hand, make the commitment in your own mind, I have to step in here and do what needs to be done to ensure that this child has a stable home environment and is raised, in the best circumstances possible.
Yeah.
Even considering that she has, no father, and a mother who is a part-time mother at best. Right. And then at the same time, not become so emotionally attached to that child that I start to think of the child really as my child. Not, it is a hard firewall to imagine erecting emotionally. And I'm not saying that I really blame Cindy, and you're right, it justified might even be the correct term. And they obviously gave Casey a lot of too much breathing room on some things, throwing a graduation party for her when she hadn't actually graduated, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, they weren't exactly parents of the year with respect to their own actual daughter, because they weren't holding her there. I mean, part of the job of a parent, whether we like it or not, is to hold the child accountable when the child has, done something they ought not have done. They're failing in that regard. And it's no wonder that she likes Kaylee better than Casey, because, little kids are easy. They want to please you. And as they get older and mouthy and their own ideas and don't cooperate, and you can't just, when they're annoying, you just pick them up and put them someplace and shut the door and know that they're safe. I mean, all that, goes away. And so I understand, believe me, how the shadow of all that creeps upon me every day. As I know, I'm watching my little 6-year-old get older. I'm like, oh boy, but as much as I can say I understand it and I empathize with it, and even see that to some degree she was justified in exerting the level of control she exerted, I can also see that she might have crossed a certain kind of line in terms of her own mental thought process to what her relationship was to that child. I think you have to tell yourself, as hard as it is, this is a child that I am responsible for, but it is not my child. And unless there is a reason, like a much more, it's not just that, Casey's young and kind of distracted by being young. Unless she's got she's a drug addict, she's an alcoholic, she's, for some reason has actually incapacitated her ability to take care of the child. At the end of the day, it is her right to pick up and move and leave whenever she wants. She's an adult.
Yeah.
And take the child.
And I think that's where and I think you nailed it, as far as it's a very challenging line to draw.
It
because
is.
she's probably, I think, and we know, so you and I probably ultimately, not to give it away, we'll agree that Casey Anthony is not an innocent here as far as the outcome of this. And that is,
I'll tell you who I wonder about in all this. Well, maybe as we go along.
we'll save that for the,
Yeah.
But I think there's enough evidence in the outcome to say that I think her mother is trying to do anything she can. Because if you notice, signed up on the, if I'm reading this correctly, having lived in the UK for so long, the same day that she's posted, no, she signed up on the 3rd of, the 3rd of July. And the post is on the 3rd of July. And I think she's a bit desperate because she knows that Casey is not capable and she can't get a hold of Casey through polite, come on, come around. I want to make sure everything's fine. And I think now this is a cry for help to try to get anybody close to her to maybe get Casey to motivate a communication. And I think this is a a double-barreled, I guess, approach to trying to speak to her. Because at this stage, Casey she had to learn to text at this stage to get in touch or to have a conversation with Casey. So let's, whilst we getting on time, also on the 3rd, Cindy doesn't know at this stage Kaylee is not with Casey. Cindy, and that's so I'm remembering this now. Cindy via text speaks to Casey. Casey is saying, look, Mom, I need some time. There's going to be a time where I'm not going to be around. So this is kind of making that point that you're making. I think I'm not punishing you, Mom. I just, you need to be ready to be without Kaylee. And it's just there's things going on. I can't always put Kaylee on the phone. And she says, I'm seeing Jeff, and it's kind of rekindled emotions, being with my fake boyfriend. And you need to be prepared. I'm going to be with my fake boyfriends in the future, and you're not going to be with Kaylee all the time. And that's
that was a good throwaway. It took me a second. My favorite.
Yeah, there we go. July 10th, Casey Anthony is recorded in surveillance video at Target, so lots of shopping going on. July 12th, Casey is seen in surveillance video at Winn-Dixie, where I did find a picture of a funny check she wrote from her friend Amy. And then July 13th, Cindy received a text to further delay return. So this is where she's saying, I'm going to go to this wedding. It's going to be a thing and we'll be home. Don't worry. So she's still in Orlando. And then 14th, parents received notice to pick up certified letter. Now, this is something that we're going to have to come back to because the defense attorney believes that they did know that that letter was there and they were delaying picking it up for whatever reason.
Okay, but this is July 14th, to be clear.
This is July 14th. Yeah. So Cindy believes that letter was there on the 10th, and the way their front door is set up, because they always come in and out of the garage. That's something that everybody said. We're always in and out of the garage. That they didn't see the letter sitting there. So it was just
if it's a certified letter, you should be able to. I mean, I guess you wouldn't have to sign for it, but I mean, the postmark should give you a clue whether or not it could have been there.
Well, and that's a good point. Something maybe that I can try to listen for in testimony coming up. But Cindy speaks to Casey, who confirms she's planning to come home. So she said, "Look, Mom, we're going to be home. Jeff's going to follow me in his car. We're going to caravan home," was what Cindy's words were, which really kind of goes to that whole Seinfeld, Hamptons strategy that she starts taking on of, I'm going to tell Mom I'm going to be home tomorrow, and then I've dealt with today. Right. She's no intent. She's already in Orlando. July 15th, this is when George and Cindy learn the certified letter is from the car that's impounded. That night, Casey Anthony again back at Blockbuster Video. She's seen at the Bank of America, Winn-Dixie in surveillance videos. And that's when Mother finds Casey to bring her home, and that's when everything kicks off. So that is the timeline, pretty much up to the point where we're going to be moving forward.
I think we're missing something. Where is the business trip to Tampa and to Jacksonville?
I'm desperate. Part of me wishes she would talk about, whatever story that she would aggregate for a business trip to Jacksonville and Tampa for Universal. I was, that would have been just sort of a guilty pleasure. I would have loved to have heard that story being concocted as somebody who does business trips myself.
Yes.
But that was all bullshit. We know it was bullshit. And I think where we're starting to dig into is, can we make a rational case? And I might play on one of our future episodes. There's an interview, Dr. Phil, for all his faults, was interviewing Jose Baez, I think is his name, the defense attorney. And the defense attorney, chalked up her I guess, what's the word? Denial to PTSD. And Dr. Phil said, do you even know what PTSD is? do you know what the symptoms are? He's like, well, there's people that were, people that worked for us that said that that could be symptomatic, somebody trying to ignore and escape. And he said, that's not what PTSD is. You don't know anything about PTSD. And then Jose Baez masterfully changes the topic on Dr. Phil, and Dr. Phil doesn't continue to hammer that point. He says, well, there's other things we need to look at in the case. And this is what it comes down to. It was a beautiful job of redirecting. Beautiful job. But it doesn't make a case that, can you have PTSD, or can you be so traumatized by, let's say, sexual abuse, which is what's being contended by the defense, that
again, very late in the day,
that behavior is acceptable or expected from somebody who, quote, loves their daughter to death. No pun intended.
I don't know. I mean, the contention at trial, that is really the most bizarre element. And I guess we'll talk about it later, that all of a sudden it's this, oh, well, my dad molested me when I was young. Right. Because it was her family throwing up even at the trial. If there's any knowledge there, and some people contend that there is any guilty knowledge, or anything that at least the family's sitting there, like her mother's sitting there thinking to herself, well, I don't know there is no good explanation for this. I sure as shit didn't search for, foolproof method of suffocation, which means, I know, I'll go up in the stand and say I searched for it. You know what I mean? Like, people think that, but so she's got her parents on the one hand basically throwing up roadblocks and throwing themselves in front of the train to prevent her conviction for this murder. And then on the other hand, she's sitting there at the defense table using her lawyer to accuse her father of really the most heinous thing one can do short of murder.
Well, George Anthony said in an interview that Jose Baez said, look, you're going to have to take one for your daughter here about the and the one thing we haven't talked about on this show, and I might make this into a two-parter, this one, but the one thing we haven't talked about is the whole theory that George Anthony, and the defense hammered this point, that George Anthony was a detective. He was a deputy sheriff. George Anthony saw, or and Casey were looking for their daughter on the 6th, or his daughter, sorry, Casey's daughter on the 16th. They find her in the pool having drowned because the ladder was left down and the door was open. And what the defense says, and we'll get into this, is something to the effect of, damn it, Casey, you've killed her. You're going to go to jail for the rest of your life, or something to that effect.
For neglect.
For me, it's just so, for somebody with so much experience, I can understand somebody being upset, like a grandfather, but somebody with so much experience in the law, there's nothing there, even then, if she drowned accidentally, that would put anyone to prison. And I can't think of any rational reason why her grandfather, who loved Kaylee to death, would go to these measures of creating a fake abduction for something that's not really criminal at that stage. Maybe neglect, but you don't see mothers who are put in jail because their daughters or sons drowned in a pool.
Yeah. I mean, it's happened to, didn't happen to Eric Clapton's son. Maybe he didn't die. Maybe was he found just enough in time that he's permanently incapacitated?
I don't know.
I know he had a kid who had an incident in a pool. I'm now trying to remember.
Stairway to Heaven, or the Tears of Heaven. That's
yeah. No, I think you're right. So he did. The child did die. Randall Cunningham, same thing.
Yeah.
And I mean, now they are celebrities, granted, and celebrities have an amazing ability to avoid culpability for things that happen. Speaking of Columbo, I've always wished that Columbo would investigate the death of William Shatner's third wife, who also managed to drown in a pool at home, which, a full-grown adult, no witnesses.
I need to look. I've not heard about this. I need to look into that.
I mean, nothing ever came of it, but and so, I mean, I assume that means that there is just no further evidence, and obviously we need to be careful. William Shatner, if you're listening, we're only asking questions. We're only asking questions.
La 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 la.
Please don't do it.
I think, though, of that story, I think that the things that stand out to me that are, one, the story that George knew that Kaylee was drowned, and then helped Casey, or somehow Casey and George worked together, or George worked independently to throw Kaylee into the bushes behind the house. And even as a police detective, that was, you know, really a bad place to hide the body. I know the defense has some evidence as to there's something nefarious going on with how the body was discovered or where it was discovered, which we'll get into. But just the whole narrative. I mean, the thing with the defense is all of the everything is just smoke and mirrors, because if I just analyze that one piece of evidence on its own, or not even evidence, that one circumstantial situation, it just doesn't jive with what a retired or you know, an ex-deputy sheriff would do.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. And it's, I mean, I could even see in a fit of rage saying something like, you ought to go to jail for the rest of your life, or, you know, you've been neglectful or whatever. Like if you find that your granddaughter has passed away, but it should be something that's said in a fit of rage that passes. And first of all, his other impulse should be to call the, I mean, what, if you see a child in the pool, like, what do? You call 911. You know what I mean? Like if you see a child who shouldn't be there in the pool, or anybody in the pool who's face down, or it doesn't look good, you know, besides getting them out, you call 911. You know, that's why.
If he was a landscaper with a criminal record, then you might have me here at this point that, yeah, he decided let's just, you know, bin the body, and, you know, I'm going to protect you from going to jail for life. It sounds like something like a 16-year-old would make up.
It's ridiculous. I mean, it is flatly ridiculous.
So I think we'll be, you know, looking at the timeline. I think really where we go from here, and we may have to reference the timeline again, is, you know, what is the argument now being made, you know, and I think we need to refer back to this timeline to see how that jives with the arguments that are being made. And I think we can discuss how we want to do this, but I think we need to really dig into that opening statement by the defense, not the closing statement, because the closing statement is very reactive based on what the prosecution is presented. I want to go with the unfiltered. This is the shit that we're trying to throw at the wall. It's not fair. I'm not going to say it like that, because I want to try to keep my biases out to a certain degree. But let's take a look at what their unfiltered argument is at the start, and let's start picking that apart and seeing if they've made a case, and really go from there. That's kind of where my view is on the next step on this.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the Casey version of the timeline that is constructed 3 years later, because obviously that's what they're going to use to try to, I mean, they're presenting it at trial, so they're going to certainly try to use the elements of that story to start sowing the seeds of reasonable doubt. I mean, the thing you know, and looking at the rules of evidence and everything in a trial, I've never sat in a jury, but I know that, like, if I were to sit in a jury, when I sit in a jury, I'm going to be very hesitant to believe anything in the opening arguments and closing arguments, but especially the opening arguments of either side, because first of all, at that point, I will have heard no evidence. It will just be them trying to basically frame my mind for what I'm about to hear. And obviously each side has an agenda, right? Which is not necessarily the truth. I mean, each side, the prosecution wants its conviction, the defense wants its acquittal, but neither side is 100% and purely committed to the truth, right? And so to listen to those opening statements and give them a lot of credence would strike me as a mistake. And I don't know to what degree the jury in this case did. But yeah, I think, like, comparing her, I guess what would be interesting, if we could add one thing, would be to compare her first story of what happened to what was presented at trial, because it changes quite a bit, doesn't it?
Well, that's why I'm thinking that first story, that's why what was presented at trial is what they've met about, what they've researched the defense. This is what we're going to go with. This is going to be the thing we want the jury to be aware of and looking into. This is the direction we want to send the jury down. And that's really what, because as I was listening to the opening argument, there was a lot of things in there. I was like, hey, really? That's going to be okay. Maybe I need to investigate this again. Maybe I need to dig in. And there's certain things I want to bring up that they've made as sort of a preemptive conclusion that this is something that's a problem. I want to look at the evidence and the information that we have and say, well, how or why is that a problem? Because this is the reasonable doubt case that they're building. Right. These are the reasons we want you to doubt why Casey is a murderer.
Well, then I mean, I hear what you're saying. I agree. Yeah. So let's go.
Well, we'll have a band meeting
A band
in between
meeting.
shows. We'll have a band meeting, and for everybody for sticking around, if you stuck around this long, God damn it, subscribe. What in the shit are you doing not subscribing? And to those
Well,
of
I mean, we do charge $700 million a month, so.
those are the
Oh
hidden
wait,
charges.
no, we don't charge anything, do we?
No, not yet. No. So we again, if we want to start getting comments in, we've had a load of comments from the Darlie Roudier case. We may have to do a comments follow up, I think, at some point on Darlie Roudier.
Oh, good
And we
idea.
do have playlists now on our YouTube channel. We have our if you look in the comments, or sorry, if you look in the description, I have our Twitter, which you'll be able to see us recording live on Twitter, Twitch, and Facebook. We're going to be playing our more streamed down shows on YouTube. We eventually do want to get to the point where we want to go live on all platforms and give people the chance to call in or comment and become a part of the conversation. So the bigger the community gets, the more views we get. And it's something I've always wanted to see is a true crime, I guess, forum where people can actually speak live, which would be great. I'd love to do that.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well,
looking forward to
Andrew. To everybody, we will probably air this over too. So our next live, maybe next week. It may be in a week and a half. We'll see. But to everybody, thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch up with you next time. Take care.
Take care, everyone.